In some circumstances, sure, he was the Director of National Intelligence, but I'm not talking about the particular.
Would Director Brennan have access to an unmasked U.S. citizen's name?
In some circumstances, yes.
Would National Security Advisor Susan Rice have access to an unmasked U.S. citizen's name?
I think yes, in general, and any other national security advisor would, I think, as a matter of their ordinary course of their business.
Would former White House advisor Ben Rhodes have access to an unmasked U.S. citizen's name?
I don't know the answer to that.
Would former Attorney General Loretta Lynch have access to an unmasked U.S. citizen's name?
In general, yes, as would any Attorney General.
So that would also include Acting AG Sally Yates?
Same answer.
Did you brief President Obama on, I'll just ask you, did you brief President Obama on any calls involving Michael Flynn?
I'm not going to get into either that particular case, that matter, or any conversations I had with the President, so I can't answer that.
I spoke with Congressman Gowdy just before your time. Congressman Gowdy, you put a lot of focus on leaks today, the anonymous sourcing that led to news reports about General Michael Flynn being caught up in U.S. surveillance of the Russian ambassador. Can you clarify if you think that is as important, less important, or more important than the question of whether the Trump campaign coordinated with the Russian government or just Russia's role in trying to influence the election?
Anderson, it's all important, which is why I asked Chairman Nunes to give me additional time at the end, and he did, and I went through all of the other non-leak related matters. I can't tell you which is more important, like I can't tell you which one of my kids I'll love more. It's all really important. I am a former criminal prosecutor, so it makes sense that I would be asked to pursue the potential criminality, but I went back and covered all of it with my second line of questioning.
At one point, you named several high-ranking former Obama administration officials. You also named the former president himself, raising the idea or the suggestion, perhaps, that it was one of them who were the source, or multiple people who were the source of General Flynn's communications, the leak of General Flynn's communications with the Russian ambassador being revealed. Were you just floating that idea, or do you believe it was one of them? Because a lot of Democrats pointing to the fact it could have been somebody from the Trump White House who didn't want General Flynn being the national security advisor.
It could have been anyone. So if anyone thinks I was floating an idea, I didn't ask the question very artfully. Anderson, we'd already established 20 different people at the NSA were in the unmasking train. I had established previously with Director Comey in another setting the number at the FBI. I went through the CIA. I went through Main Justice. And then I started with Clapper. Went to Brennan, Sally Yates, whom I actually have a friendship with. So anyone who thinks that I was accusing the President of the United States of committing a crime is either drinking on the job or wasn't listening to the question very well.
And just to put a button on this, you said a moment ago that you're not suggesting that President Obama committed a crime. That is what President Trump has accused him of. In the those early morning tweets he sent out, I think, 2 weeks ago. Does that make sense to you?
I used to accuse people of crimes for a living, and I know how serious that accusation is, and it needs to be backed up by probable cause and a grand jury indictment. The President of the United States, I don't think, can disseminate classified information because he or she is the final arbiter of what is classified. So I've got lots of policy differences with President Obama. I have never accused him of committing a crime and would never do so unless I was a prosecutor and had a formal charging document. And even then, I probably wouldn't do it publicly.
In general about leaks, there's obviously leaks have always gone on. I think Comey or the NSA director today talked about reading over the weekend about Washington complaining about leaks. Your Benghazi committee was accused of leaking your report to certain media outlets, or the Republicans on it was accused by the Democrats, and Democrats are accused of leaking other information. Is there a role for leaks? I mean, people point to Watergate and Deep Throat. Even, Michael Flynn might still be the national security advisor today had that information not ultimately have leaked out.
Well, Anderson, there's a difference between leaks. That's a moral issue, whether or not you never heard me compliment WikiLeaks. You never heard me compliment Julian Assange. In fact, I can't believe Republicans who compliment either one of them were did last summer. That's a moral issue at some level. The leaking of classified information, or the leaking of information that was acquired through another crime is a criminal matter. So it's not my job to judge folks in your line of work whether or not you should rely on anonymous sources. I assume you have to for some things, but relying on anonymous sources and relying on classified information for which it is a felony to disseminate are two separate lanes of inquiry in my judgment.
Congressman Gowdy, I appreciate talking to you as always. Thank you.
Yes.
Here to talk about where all this might lead, Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy, whom you heard from just a moment ago. Congressman, thanks for being with us. You said today, referring to President Obama, that he is, quote, either part of it or he's not. If he's part of it, then we've had a series of witnesses that have misled the committee. And if he's not part of it, then he has no business asserting executive privilege. What do you exactly mean by that statement? Are you implying that the president is involved in covering something up?
No, quite the opposite. We've had no one that has testified before either judiciary or oversight that the president had any role in Fast and Furious at all. He said he didn't know about it, and I take him at his word. My point was to more illustrate the absurdity of asserting executive privilege for something you had no role in. Executive privilege is for conversations that are had with the chief executive, so he can rely on people's counsel and he doesn't have to worry about them being subpoenaed before a committee of Congress. He had no conversation.
But that's not that's not actually true, though. I mean, Vice President Cheney used executive privilege for discussions about energy policy. It was even used with Hillary Clinton and her role in the health care debate under the Clinton administration. So it doesn't necessarily mean the president was sitting in meetings.
Well,
correct?
What does it mean then? I mean, it's executive privilege. It's not. It has to mean something. It can't cover your entire administration, or no one would have to turn over documents.
One of your Democratic colleagues, Congressman Elijah Cummings, said today that Attorney General Holder is simply protecting documents that he's prohibited by law from producing and is in compliance with federal statutes passed by both houses of Congress, signed by the President of the United States. Clearly, you voted to hold him in contempt of Congress. You disagree with that?
No, he's partially correct. I think the initial request was for wiretap applications, which Rule 6C of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure does not allow anyone to give to anyone who's not part of the investigation or the trial. So to the extent that the original request for documents was overly broad and included protected material, then Mr. Cummings is correct. Where he's not correct is after Chairman Issa narrowed the scope of documents to not include anything that was legally prohibited from being discovered, he's still not complying. What could possibly be protected about the drafting of a false letter to a committee of Congress?
But back in the Bush administration, when Cheney was talking about executive privilege because of discussions on energy policy and discussions with people from outside the White House even, Republicans rallied around him and said it's legitimate. Democrats, I mean, it was very much a partisan issue, just as this is now. If it was okay, though, under the Bush administration, why isn't it okay now? What's the difference?
I've never subscribed to that theory in life, which is why I may not be long for this town. I was a prosecutor back when that was going on. The notion that it's okay for me to do it only because you did it has never been appealing to me. If it's wrong to do it now, it was wrong to do it then, and I would hope that a court or someone else would have intervened and said that you're wrong to assert executive privilege. The fact that a Republican does something doesn't mean I automatically agree with. In fact, I would be happy to have everyone who's had their fingerprints on Wide Receiver, Fast and Furious, any gun walking investigation come, and I don't think you would be able to tell much of a difference in the tone of my questions, irrespective of their political persuasion.
What happens next? I mean, this is going to go to a vote in the full House. How do you see this being brought to a resolution? Do you think it's going to wind up in the courts?
I hope not. I hope he gives us the documents. It's not a political exercise to me. I want to know how Fast and Furious happened. I want to know how a false letter was delivered to a committee of Congress. So I hope we don't get to that point, because I hope the Attorney General gives us the documents. If he doesn't, then yeah, we'll vote on it on the floor of the House. And there are three different forms of contempt. There's the plenary powers of Congress. There's criminal contempt. There's civil contempt. If it's criminal, then it'll be referred to the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Ray Machen. If it's civil, it will go to a federal judge here in the District of Columbia.
Congressman Gowdy, I appreciate your time today.